Welcome to your weekly astrological weather. This is your place to get practical guidance for not only surviving, but thriving with the cosmic tides. Hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly weather. It is so great to be here connecting with all of you. Thank you for joining us. And today I'm very thrilled to have intuitive astrologer Nura Rachelle back on the show. She did the weekly weather for us a couple months ago, and it was so awesome. So I'm really grateful that she's back, and we're going to be covering the weather from June 6th today until the 12th. And if you're interested in learning more about Nura, we're gonna dive into the weather. So I'm not gonna do too much of an introduction, but you can go to episode 396, which was the Astrology of 2022. And it's a great episode. You'll get to know Nura a little bit more. And then also, I always love looking at those older forecasts, and especially when you're in it, when you're actually in the year, or you're in the week, or you're in the month, whatever it is, and then hear what the astrologers had to say, because sometimes it lands even more powerfully. And, because now you're in it, so you have the context and the content. So you can go back and look at that episode 396. And before we dive into the weather for this week, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you are invited to our free solstice panel event. This is a forecast that's focused on the rest of 2022. We're also going to be peering into 2023. Nura is going to be joined by 4 other astrologers for this event. And you can join us at astrologyhub.com/solstice panel. That's astrologyhub.com/solstice panel. And Nura, you're going to be on June 15th, right? That's the day that you're speaking?
Yes, Mercury Day, Wednesday.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So again, that's free. It's happening June 15th and 16th. You can go to astrologyhub.com/solstice panel and join us today. All right, Nura, let's look ahead at the week. What would you say is the overarching theme for us this week?
We are working with 2 opposing forces, of course, because it's Gemini season. So we're working with duality, but in order to move through this portal of initiation, we have to be able to go through and not be pulled to either side of the polarity, right? So on the polarity that's been really obvious to me is fast motion forward. And then also on this seemingly opposite side of the spectrum, complete standstill, not moving at all. So to me, my theme, at least what I've been really feeling into for this week, is slowing down in order to speed up. And that really being couched in the intention of sacred service.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that. Couched in the intention of sacred service.
Yeah. So why are we even creating what we're creating? Why are we even doing what we're doing? That to me is the call of sacred service. And it feels really aligned with the coming transits of the week, because not only are we going to have the first quarter moon in Virgo at 16 degrees of Virgo, and that's one of my top 3 transits for the week. We also, on that same day, we have Vestalia, which is an ancient Roman holiday that actually lasts for a week from June 7th through to June 15th every year. And it's all about sacred service, making also an offering to Vesta herself. And I think about it a lot in the ways of, we feed the part of us that needs sustenance in order to continue to serve. It's really coming down to those age-old sayings, like you can't fill somebody else's well unless your well is filled. It feels a lot also like that sacred pause, the pregnant pause too, of what is allowed to enter in when we are not externally efforting so much. So there's this, it feels almost like a changing of the guards. And I actually pulled a couple tarot cards asking about this specific energy. And I pulled the Queen of Cups and the 2 of Swords. and together. And I pulled them with the question of what can we anticipate in working with this Vestalia and also this first quarter moon in Virgo. And I pulled it from the conscious realm and the unconscious realm. So in the conscious side of things, I pulled the Queen of Cups. So a lot of, if you're going to be efforting at something, if you're going to be doing something on purpose, it would be emotional processing. That's what the Queen of Cups is all about. Really holding your emotions as sacred, really allowing yourself to feel your feelings and treating your emotions as the important spiritual messengers that they are. But then on the unconscious level, the Two of Swords, some people love this card and some people absolutely hate when they see this card. I am learning to love it because it's very much the, trust the timing of your own life. Trust that you're going to know what you need to know and you need to know it. You might feel like you're in limbo right now, but there's something deeper. There's a greater mystery. There's some greater divine plan at play here, and you'll know exactly what you need to know when you need to know it, but you have to be tuned in to your emotional intelligence in order to really receive that download. So that's how I read these two cards together. And you can't make this stuff up. I didn't plan to pull those cards, but they fit so well with what I was also tuning into around this first quarter moon in Virgo, and then also the corresponding Vestalia.
So it's amazing to me that the Roman, they had Saturnalia, which was a festival for Saturn. And now I'm learning Vestalia, which is a festival for Vesta. They seemed very connected with the cosmos in a way that we seem to have lost. I mean, if you're thinking about these long festivals they were having in accordance with, well, I guess then they didn't have Vesta as an asteroid. So it would have been Vesta, a different archetype. It was Vesta
as the goddess. Yeah.
Right.
As the goddess herself. Right. And Vesta has a really important story because she was the sister of also Juno and Ceres. So Juno, Ceres, and Vesta were sisters to also Jupiter and the other gods. So they were actually as important. It's not like this hierarchical, lesser importance kind of energy. They were as important and they were as revered by the collective. And Vestalia was really interesting because there would be this sacred chamber in which the Vestal Virgins really operated that nobody could really access them for most of the rest of the year. But during Vestalia, they would open these doors to allow women only to come in and bring offerings, which feels very like, how often is there a woman only festival? Usually it's the opposite, or women excluded from something, but right. It's very much a time to really celebrate the important duty of keeping the sacred hearth fire alive.
So can you back up a little bit? Because I know Vesta energy is a huge emphasis of this week, and I don't want to make the assumption that everybody knows what that means. So Vesta, just maybe a little bit, you just gave a little bit of story around what that archetype represents. But then also when you're saying that, that they would use this time to make an offering to Vesta, what does this all mean and how would it apply to our life today?
Yes. So I love Vesta. She is really the goddess asteroid of sacred service and devotion, and also what we make sacred in our lives. So where we have Vesta.
So is it like Virgo? I mean, it feels
she
very
rules Virgo. Yeah, she has, that's the strongest ruling affinity is with Virgo. So that's why I love that there's also this corresponding first quarter moon in Virgo, which doesn't always happen that way, right? Yeah. It would happen in the Gemini cycle every year, but not always on this exact day. So that's just really interesting that they correspond. So that idea of what you're making sacred in your life, what you're devoted to, a lot of times it's also what you will make sacrifices for the greater good. And so where you have Vesta, you tend to be giving a lot because you realize there's something sacred about that part of your life that you are the one holding the flame for, keeping the flame alive. So say, for example, I have Vesta in my 7th house, the house of relationships. And it is so important for me when I form a sacred contract with somebody to really uphold that contract, or to realize like every single connection that I make is a divine appointment. Like we could not even come to each other's path if we were not meant to connect. And so I do give a lot in relationships. And sometimes, the other person might not have Vesta in the 7th house. Maybe it's just me. So sometimes I've had to learn some lessons. I'm like, oh, I'm probably usually going to be the one for sure, always giving a lot in relationships. And then the lessons I've had to learn about that, right? Like making sure I fill my own well before giving to others. There's this interesting correspondence for people where we have Vesta is also sometimes where we need to take more breaks, essentially for self-care, for filling ourselves, for feeding ourselves, because that's what we tend to be feeding to other people. That's where that affinity of Virgo comes into, because Virgo has a lot to do with nourishment and taking care of ourselves, nutrients, food. So there's also that affinity. So I think in this coming week, how we can really use this energy is purification. How can we purify our space? How can we, especially where Vesta is right now, Vesta is in the early degrees of Pisces. So between 4 or 5 degrees of Pisces is what she'll be traveling through during this Vestalia portal. And so where you have those degrees of Pisces, maybe that's what you're really focusing on purification. This actually really comes up with this Queen of Cups. It's emotional processing, emotional purification. You can do a lot on the physical level to support that, like drinking a lot of water, eating only what you really need. And that is, I think, often the most difficult of all. Sometimes we'll eat because we're bored or because we're having a feeling that we want to avoid something like that. But this is really a time to see our bodies as really the sacred temples that they are, and do purification. So if you're interested in fasting or juice cleansing, things like that, this is a really good time for that. I was also doing some research on different practices that people would do. So having a candle, for example, and then lighting the candle and keeping it in a safe place where it can stay lit overnight, or maybe even for the full week. So maybe one of those really long candles that they use sometimes in different religious holidays. And obviously keeping it in a safe place. And then even just, what do you have to do? How do you have to discipline yourself to keep that flame alive and safe, not burning your house down? Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
I am having so many thoughts as you're speaking. I mean, there's so many different angles to this. I think one thing to keep in mind too, or a question that we could be asking ourselves is, what is that sacred flame within me that is worth protecting, that is worth creating space for, that is worth creating discipline around, so that it can continue to burn and burn brightly and create warmth for other people in my life. And this is so huge, because I think we often don't give the things that we do hold the most sacred, we don't give them enough space. We don't give them enough oxygen. We don't give them enough air to really grow. And it's, we crowd the space, and we busy our schedules, and we, everything's so tight that there's not enough room. So I love this. And I love this reminder right now. I mean, I think it obviously, the astrology keeps the conversation so relevant. But I mean, I really think it's huge. And then what are you devoted to? What are you devoted to? And are you giving it the space it needs? Are you holding it sacred? Just like the Vestal Virgins are holding that sacred space for the entire community, or the entire country, I guess. We have that responsibility in our own lives to do that with the things that we're devoted to.
Absolutely. And you're such a channel. You mentioned, what are we feeding the flame, or keeping it alive, and it needs space and it needs oxygen. The Romans and the Greeks, I imagine as well, in Hestia, because Vesta and Hestia are considered parallel goddesses, they would really see the flame itself as Vesta. So it wasn't like a statue. She was one of the only goddesses that wasn't made into a statue. Essentially, she would just be the flame. So it's so relevant what you were saying. It's really honoring. It's almost very elemental, like the purity of the element of fire, but really seen through the feminine perspective, because there requires the vessel of what you're holding the fire in. And if you look at Vesta's glyph, it is like a vessel, like a double layered vessel with a little flame on top.
Right.
So the vessel is also very important.
The vessel being your body, the vessel being your home, the vessel being your work, like whatever it is. That's just amazing. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about why this is up this week. You said first quarter moon, and that's Virgo, but why
So
Vesta?
Vestalia just happens every year
Oh,
from
it's
June
just
7th
because
to
we're in
15th.
Vestalia. Okay.
Yeah, yes.
And did they why was it during this time? Do you know like what the significance was?
I actually don't know, but
Okay.
thinking about the fact that every Gemini moon cycle, there will be a first quarter moon in Virgo makes me think
Okay.
of it in that way. But there's also the correspondence with it coming right before the summer solstice. So intuitively, if I had to guess at it, it might be purifying the self before you prepare for the summer solstice.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. And then how do people find where in their chart this is specifically relevant right now?
So you'll want to look at two places. Definitely where Vesta is right now. So between 4 and 5 degrees of Pisces, but then also the corresponding first quarter moon in Virgo being at 16 degrees of Virgo, and that being June 7th. That's really early in the morning, 7:48 a.m. The first quarter moon is official. But really, that whole day or two, that Tuesday, June 7th into Wednesday, June 8th, I think we're still in that first quarter moon energy, which is always very, according to the evolutionary astrology paradigm, it's very crisis in action. But it's another way to phrase that might be like, I know there's something that I need to do, but I don't exactly know what that is. And so I'm kind of experimenting with things. I'm putting myself out there. And so that corresponding with Vestalia, I think it goes to show like there's not one way to honor your sacred flame. I think and especially because it's lasting over a week, there's a lot of opportunity to do purification and cleansing. I have this cute little broom that a friend of mine made for me. And that's actually another great activity to do too, is they would get new brooms and burn their old broom. So I'm probably not going to burn this, but at least you could do some sort of saging with it, or some would say do like a sea salt bath kind of thing with a broom, and then go and sweep your whole house with it. And even just that act of sweeping, it can clear away the old energy. So there's also a feng shui correspondence here too, like making sure in your space you really only have the things that you love. Very Marie Kondo, like if you don't absolutely love it, get it out of there.
I love how she says, does it spark joy? Like, does it spark joy? And if not, then bless it, thank it, and get rid of it. If any of you, if you are not familiar with Marie Kondo and her work, highly recommend. She has awesome books. And then there was a series. Was that on Netflix?
I think so, yeah.
It was on Netflix. Do you remember what it was called? Tidy Up. I think it was called Tidy Up.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think it would be interesting to watch people tidy up their homes, but it was a really, really amazing series. I watched it with my daughters, and we all got so inspired to like fold the way that she folds and really just clear out our space. So that could be some great inspiration for this week, is check out Marie Kondo and her work. She's so Vesta in this way, so Virgo. Yeah.
Yes. And so where you have Virgo and Pisces, that whole axis really of the physical cleansing, but then how it also corresponds with spiritual cleansing, and also the compassion and surrender and flow that happens between them both. What I really love that I learned about Feng Shui, because growing up, I wasn't a fan of cleaning. I was like, oh, that's the thing that I definitely don't want to do. Like I would go to my mom and say like, Mom, I'm bored. And she'd be like, I have like 10 things that you can clean. And I'd be like, okay, never mind. I'll go find something else to do, you know?
Yes.
But now, like, somebody explained it to me that the reason for Feng Shui is that you actually want to be able to have your space so immaculate that it's easy to clean, because essentially cleanliness is next to godliness. Like if your energy and your space is clean, the energy can flow, which means your creativity can flow, your abundance can flow, your relational dynamics can flow. It affects so many things. And they're the things that we often take for granted and maybe aren't paying as much attention to. So it just feels like pay attention to the details, pay attention to the small things.
You know, it's also interesting. I've been going through a project at my home in our yard. The yard was kind of overgrown, and it was like, God, let's actually put some energy in this direction and clean it up. And once it was clean, then I could get creative. Then I could see, ooh, like we could put a fountain here and we could make a little orchard here and we could have a garden here. But I couldn't see any of that before we got to this baseline of clear. And I'm thinking that as a metaphor for anything that we're working on. If there's a bunch of clutter and the space is chaotic and just sort of out of control, you can't actually be creative. You can't actually see what is possible, what the potential is. So this process, it is a lot more than just the mundane cleaning. It is a spiritual act in that way, that it just opens up that space for what's next and what is available to be created.
Exactly. And then corresponding that with the first quarter moon energy of the desire to be creative. It's like we were all seeded something at that new moon in Gemini, May 30th. It was at 9 degrees Gemini. So you could think back to where that was. And then sometimes we're not sure. It's like, okay, we know something came in, but what was it? What am I supposed to do with that energy? And usually around the first quarter moon is where it becomes obvious, where it becomes more apparent, but it's not fully apparent until you get to the full moon, which will happen in Sagittarius a week from then. But it's like at the first quarter moon, we get this opportunity to get it moving. And so you were mentioning, like, you couldn't even get creative until you cleaned out the mess. Sometimes I think that's also the inspiration will find you working. Energy, like you just have to build the momentum. So for me, when I'm in writer's block or creative block, I know for me a good strategy is like go clean something, and then all of a sudden I'm out of my brain and I'm not forcing something, and then all of a sudden it comes in. So I kind of use cleaning as that kind of strategy as well.
One more, exactly. And one more thing that was sparked for me as you were speaking, and then we'll go to the next most important astrological transit of the week. But anyone who's been listening to me recently, you may have noted I made a comment about our puppy changing, like, and it seemed like a light switch where she went from like complete puppy out of control mode, and we were working really hard to train her, to all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, angel dog, where did this dog come from? And I had gone away, and then when we came back, she was just a different dog. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago on the weather, and how it was like, wow, those seeds that we had planted, they were working under the surface and they came to fruition, right? Well, it turns out that probably more of the explanation for her shift in behavior is the fact that she's pregnant. And we are having puppies any day now. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it's the same process. Right when we found out that she's having puppies, and we're having 8 to 11 puppies very soon, it was like, we need to clear space. We need to clear space for this process. It needs to be clean. I have pictures of my daughters like out on the lanai, the porch, just like scrubbing it down and making space for her whelping box, and making space for, this whole birthing process that's going to happen. And again, it's just another example of how we're creating space for what is sacred. You have to clean it first and purify it, and then birth is possible. Birth can happen. So anyways, wish me luck, everybody, with this, because this is the first litter that I am ever a part of birthing. And I'm like, I feel like I have that nervous first mother energy of like, okay, like we got to make sure everything's ready for this. And it's also very exciting.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And the fact that this is all happening within the post retrograde shadow of the Mercury retrograde, and then also Saturn freshly retrograde. I wonder if there's some sort of reconnection for something in you as a mother too.
Completely.
And getting to do it with your daughters. That's really cool.
It's exciting on many levels. Okay, let's go to the next transit for this week that you want us to pay attention to.
Yes. So it's full on goddesses this week. So if we actually back up to today, Monday, June 6th, very early this morning, we have Pallas Athene conjunct Uranus at 16 degrees, 35 minutes Taurus. So Uranus is really spotlit this year with there's going to be a Uranus North Node Mars conjunction midsummer. We're already building up to that though in this conjunction window. They're already within 8-degree orb. So we're already getting close. But as we have these different conjunctions with Uranus, I think we're going to get little tastes of the bigger energy that's coming with the Uranus North Node conjunction August 1st this year. So Pallas Athene is the goddess asteroid of creative intelligence. She was birthed from Zeus's head or Jupiter's head, and has a lot to do with the balance between masculine and feminine in our life. And really, they both have to come together in sacred union in order for anything to be created. So there's a lot of this understanding, well, am I balanced in my efforts? And effort, I think, is typically associated with the yang force of like, I'm trying to do something. I'm very on purpose trying to create something. But I do think it takes effort too on the yin side to be internal, to tell yourself, okay, I need to slow down a little bit, or I need to listen internally to what my emotions are telling me. So the effort can be internal and external, but we want to have a balance with that. And then the conjunction to Uranus, the liberator, well, he's just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do something completely different. We're going to shake things up a little bit. It's at 16 degrees Taurus, which has a lot to do with our values. And I really view this as high self values. We have an opportunity to make sure that what we're creating, Pallas Athene, is in alignment with our higher self values, Taurus. And we're probably going to receive it in a surprising way, Uranus, because who doesn't love surprises?
You know, it's funny, Nura, I feel like whenever we talk about Uranus and surprises in astrology, I don't know about all of you, but there's sort of that, oh God, like, what am I going to be? It's like we've lost the innocent child, like, oh, yay, surprises. It's like, oh God, surprise. Like, what's that going to be? And it doesn't have to be that way, right? I mean, the Uranus surprises are not always bad surprises. They can be really delightful surprises.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can be both. I mean, and I don't want to say bad. It's just,
it can be just unexpected. And I think especially in Taurus, it's how comfortable are you with being comfortable? Are you willing to allow yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable and then challenge all of the assumptions around your comfort zone? Because maybe you're comfortable because you thought that was possible for you to create. But maybe if you snap out of that, there's actually something way bigger to catch you. I think there's with the Taurus energy, it's like the earth mother wants to catch us, is how I see it. There's this greater purpose that actually is more about the collective and about what's happening for the whole earth evolution right now. So it almost seems like if we're kind of popped out of our own individual story a little bit, that's where our comfort zone is. Like, who am I, this one single person, and what I'm doing, what I'm creating. But the unexpected, I think, especially when it comes to Uranus, because Uranus is a transpersonal planet, it's going to pop us into something that we're like, oh, I didn't even realize that this would be an even better option for me. I have a personal example. I stopped teaching yoga right around the time COVID hit because I didn't want to go online. I was already doing so many other things online, and yoga for me was my happy place where I could go and be in the studio with people without technology other than music, and just be in my body and be with people. So I essentially like stopped teaching yoga, and that was kind of hard. Like, I did my own practice, but since I moved here to Arizona, I moved in next to somebody who has all of these connections with personal fitness and yoga. And it was very much a surprise. It entered in on the solar eclipse, new moon solar eclipse in Taurus, that I'm going to start teaching yoga again at one of her gyms. Nice. And it was a surprise, like a total out of left field surprise. And one of the things, the first thing that came up was like, oh my gosh, do I have space for this? Do I have time for this? But then sitting with it, I was like, well, what else am I really here for? I'm here to do this service about embodiment, about healing and health. And so since that point, so much has shifted, and it definitely took me out of my comfort zone. But now I see it as, well, this is what I'm praying for. Sometimes I think that Uranus is like the God force, and what we pray for comes through in a Uranian fashion a lot of times. If we're not receiving it from somewhere else, like sometimes we'll receive our prayers in a Jupiter way, or in a Saturn way, right? We kind of know what those are, like Jupiter, big expansion. It's like what we want, like Santa Claus, like, oh, this is on my wish list. This is what I wanted. Great. And then Saturn's like, I'm not sure if this is what I wanted, but I know it needs to happen. So I'm happy for it. Uranus is like, whew, left field. Like, I didn't know this was what I wanted. I didn't know this was the thing that would shake me out of my stagnancy. It's kind of how I see it. So there's an opportunity here to be shaken out of stagnancy.
I feel like the puppies are that for me.
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't know this was the thing I needed. I certainly wasn't preparing or planning for it. All right. And it was definitely a surprise. So I would love to go to one of your yoga classes, by the way. I cannot even imagine how you weave astrology and yoga into how you teach yoga. It just must be amazing to be in class with you. So it's very exciting for you and your students. Okay, so we have this Pallas Athene conjunct Uranus. And okay, I don't want to summarize that one yet. Give us one more or any more transits that you think we should pay attention to this week.
Yeah. And so the last one is Saturday, June 11th, Venus conjunct Uranus. So we start the week today with Pallas Athene conjunct Uranus and then Venus conjunct Uranus. And they're both at 16 degrees. Just the minutes are a little bit different. According to Degree Theory by Nikola Stoyanovich, I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. He created the degree theory where essentially, degree number 1 was Aries, 2 is Taurus, 3 was Gemini, 4 Cancer, so on. And once you got to 13, it began again at Aries. And so 29 degrees is ruled by Leo if you kind of work yourself backwards that way. So you can just search that, Degree Theory by Nikola Stoyanovich. He's great. And he really took the degrees and simplified them. And I've been experimenting with this because I really view everything in astrology, and especially with all of the different forms of astrology and methodologies and frameworks. I'm like, I just have to try it. I have to see if it works. And then I'll know if this is a tool that I'm going to use. So far it's been really working for me. And I invite you to explore this if it's calling to you. But 16 degrees is associated with Cancer. So we have this Pallas Athene conjunct Uranus, Monday, June 6th at 16 degrees Taurus, but it's a Cancerian degree. And then again, that's Saturday, June 11th, Venus conjunct Uranus, still at 16 degrees, a Cancerian degree. And the first quarter moon at 16 degrees Virgo, a Cancerian degree. There's a Cancerian theme here. And we are also in this pre-shadow of the summer solstice, which we know heralds the ingress of Cancer season. So to me, there's something again about this great mother energy, the goddess energy. Also thinking about what Cancer rules in our bodies is our stomachs and our feeding organs too. If you're a woman, your breasts and stomach, how we feed ourselves and also how we would feed and nurture somebody else. So also thinking about the puppies.
I love when astrology is so literal. I mean, I know not all of you are having this experience with puppies, but I'm listening to you just laughing. It's like, really? This is so literal.
It is so literal. Yeah. And so I think for this Venus conjunct Uranus, and especially with Venus being the planetary ruler of the North Node in Taurus in her own ruling sign, Taurus, there's a very strong Venusian energy here saying, pay attention to how you're feeding yourself. This is really important. Feed yourself what you want to see more of. So feed yourself that ease, that love, that comfort, that security, that groundedness. What can you do to stay centered and grounded? And also with Uranus, I think sometimes with that liberation energy, it might mean letting go of something too. So maybe we've been doing something that if we actually just removed it or just looked in a different direction, that might be all that we need to do. Because I also view Taurus as simplification. And it's like oftentimes the best strategy is the most simple thing. So sometimes it is literally just doing less and self-care.
Wow. Okay. Amazing themes to work with this week. Are we ready for a summary, or do you want to tell us about anything else?
I think we're ready. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're basically saying that the theme is this idea of slowing down to speed up. And there's actually a Hawaiian word for that, and it's wiki wiki, which means hurry up but go slow. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of the same idea. And so, so slowing down to speed up. And I remember when my daughters were young, they'd be like, Mama, slow down. If you slow down, then you can do more. And I think they were learning that at school or something, because whenever they would say it, was like, oh gosh, you're so right. So slowing down to speed up. And this is this continuation of the sort of Gemini duality, polarity theme of the whole Gemini season. And Gary Caton is our inner circle astrologer, and he focused a lot on that in our forecast event. And what he was saying is that when you have two seemingly opposite forces, that if you can hold both of them, so you don't go too far to one extreme, and you don't go too far to the other extreme, if you can hold both of them, then a third option appears, a new horizon, something you didn't think of, something you didn't anticipate. So we've been doing that in the inner circle, kind of thinking about, where am I really polarized? Like, I can only see it this way, or maybe I'm polarized against a person or a cause or anything. So where am I polarized? So paying attention to that, and then seeing, can I hold both of those things at the same time? It's really hard. Like, if you think about it, some of these things that we're really attached to, it's a hard thing to do, but can I hold the possibility for both of them having some value? And then can I just be open to what that third option or new horizon offers? I see you doing something with your cards.
I wanted to pull a card really specifically about that, and I pulled the Hanged Man, which is the card of surrender, really not doing anything. Like, he's holding, reverse tree pose upside down, and
right.
he's at that edge of comfortable discomfort. That's what it sounds like when you're navigating duality. It's the comfortable discomfort. What's the middle way? How long can you sustain this discomfort, but also with the trust that you'll know exactly what you need to know when you need to know it, as the Two of Swords says, especially when you're willing to do your emotional work. So it all makes, it all comes together so nicely.
It really does. We had our new moon ceremony in the inner circle, and we visualized two pillars, or two, maybe trees alongside a pathway. So it seems like two pillars, right? The real Gemini visual. And then we imagined the path in between emerging. And she said that she'd been having this conflict with her sister. And so she saw herself on one side and her sister on the other side. And then, oh no, it wasn't her sister, it was her daughter. Actually, it was her daughter. And then the middle path that emerged was her poetry, and how she wanted to get back into expressing how she feels through her poetry. And she was sensing that would be a way that she would actually be able to meet her daughter again. And so it was just this really beautiful, real life illumination of that idea of holding both, allowing something that's unexpected to come through in the middle of those things. All right. So this is all associated with this first quarter moon in Virgo, which is also corresponding with Vestalia. So this idea of any sort of efforting that you're doing, being around emotional processing, holding emotions as sacred, trusting the timing of your own life, and surrendering to the greater mystery, that you'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. So practicing that this week, also asking questions around, what are you devoted to? There's something sacred in you, and you're helping to keep that flame alive. What is that for you? Making sure that you fill your own well, that you fill your own cup, in order so that it's spilling over to the people in your life, versus just depleting and depleting and depleting and depleting until you have nothing. Where do you need to take more breaks? Where do you need to give yourself more nourishment? How can you purify your space? All these things very relevant now. So you guys hear me say this all the time. If you need to, put it on your calendar. Space purification. Decluttering, space for myself, whatever it is, but just making sure you do that, the discipline of making the space in the first place to make the space that you need, which, it's the thing. It's like, it's the first thing to go when life gets busy. It's like, okay, well, I guess I didn't need that beach walk. I guess I didn't need that nap. I guess I didn't need the bath. I can just do this instead. And so you're the person who, at the end ends up depleted. Look at where Vesta is in your chart and look at 4 to 5 degrees Pisces. And those are going to be the areas of your life where this is really activated. We also have Pallas Athene conjunct Uranus. So my notes there are a little bit jumbled. I have, how comfortable are you with discomfort? But there was also something around your values. And like, can you repeat that?
Yeah, values in that it's Taurus, but really in what you're creating, because Pallas Athene has a lot to do with really the culture around our creativity. So it could also be what are we influenced by in our creative process, and maybe where do we need to shake ourselves out of that? And an example could be like if you're online doing social media things and you're like, well, I just really don't want to do it according to what the algorithm says I have to do. What if there's another way? What if there's another way to do this creative process? So that's something I think is really the invitation to, is get out of your creative comfort zone and align more with your core values versus what maybe you've been told you have to do.
Yes, very good. All right. And then we have Venus conjunct Uranus. And this is more of this great mother goddess energy. How do we feed ourselves? And also Venusian energy. Again, how are you feeding yourself? How are you nurturing yourself? What do you need to liberate yourself from? What do you need to let go? What do you need to simplify? And usually the best strategy is usually the one that's the most simple. You know, we had a day recently that was just booked with meetings. And I had several team members reach out to me and just go, can we not have that meeting right now? And do we need to have that meeting right now? It's like, you know what? No, we don't. Let's just open up that space, because I know there's a lot that everybody's working on. And so it's kind of some of these things that we just do automatically because they're a part of our rhythm. Sometimes those things, when you look and go, oh, wait, actually, maybe I don't need to do that right now. Maybe that's the thing that I can cut. So just looking at all those different places in your life, and Nura, you've given us so much to work with, and yet it's very simple and pure and clean, which is also a representative of the energy of the week.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you about that degree theory, because that's fascinating. And is that what you're going to be teaching in your mastery class for the inner circle later this year? Or are you teaching something different?
As of now, I have the intention of teaching on Venus Sun initiations, but I'm very fluid. So I pretty much teach about whatever I'm most fascinated in. So I'm sure that degree theory will come into it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've had anybody teach on that specifically. So that would be an incredible thing. And actually, those of you listening, if you're interested and curious about this degree theory and going in deeper, let us know. And then maybe Nura can alter her mastery class to reflect that, or at least cover it.
Yeah, for sure. Be happy to.
All right. Perfect. So Nura is going to be joining 5 or 4. I think there's 5 of you total. Shannon Gill can't make the forecast event, but the next 6 astrologers the next 5 astrologers in the inner circle are going to be giving the free forecast at the summer solstice. Well, I guess it's not really at the summer solstice, but it's timed with the summer solstice, which is June 15th and 16th. And if you loved what Nura had to share today, you're going to get more of that during that free panel event in June. And then is there anything else you want to add before we close up?
Again, just slowing down to speed up. And that's really going to bring us into our sacred service. I think we're all being stretched right now. And all of the pre-existing polarities that we've been living with since time immemorial are really just obvious and blatant right now. So in a way, things are harder, but it's also, we can use that really intense, blatant, obvious polarity to make our spiritual work more simple, to make it easier, to really understand, oh, okay, these are my triggers. This is what's coming up for me. This is my work. My work is to come to my center. Essentially, my work is to come to figure out how do I add more love to this situation? And how do I do that? Trusting that I know exactly what I need to know at this time.
Perfect. Nura, thank you so much for joining us again. Thanks to all of you out there for tuning into the weekly weather this week. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We will catch you on the next episode.